She walked into the luxury dealership wearing jeans and a navy sweatshirt, her brown hair cascading naturally around her shoulders. As she admired the gleaming vehicles, not a single salesperson approached. When she finally expressed interest in the premium model, the salesman in the crisp blue suit held up his hand dismissively. "I'm sorry," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "but you clearly don't have the money for this." Little did he know that her husband's black card was about to change everything in this Chicago showroom. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Diane Mitchell's spacious lakefront apartment in downtown Chicago. At 40, Diane had the kind of quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was and what mattered to her. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail as she sipped her coffee, gazing out at Lake Michigan. "Are you sure you don't want me to come with you?" James's voice echoed from the hallway. Her husband of 12 years appeared, straightening his tie before another day at the investment firm he'd built from the ground up. Diane smiled, shaking her head. "I've got this. You know how I feel about these things." James chuckled. "I do indeed. That's why I married you." Their life together was one of contradictions that somehow made perfect sense. James had amassed a fortune that put them among Chicago's elite, yet Diane remained steadfastly committed to her minimalist philosophy. She wore clothes for comfort, not labels. Their home, while undeniably luxurious, was free of ostentation. To Diane, wealth was a responsibility, not a personality trait. "Besides," she added, "I want to do this myself. My car, my decision." Her 10-year-old sedan had finally given up the ghost, and after years of refusing James's offers to upgrade, Diane had decided it was time. Not because she craved luxury, but because she had researched extensively and found a model that aligned with both her environmental concerns and practical needs. "Just promise me one thing," James said, kissing her forehead. "Don't let anyone give you a hard time." Diane laughed. "When have I ever?" After James left, Diane changed into her favorite worn jeans and a comfortable navy sweatshirt, with Chicago emblazoned across the front. She checked her reflection briefly, not bothering with makeup. At 40, her face told the story of a life well lived, laugh lines around her eyes, a natural glow that came from prioritizing wellness over appearances. She slipped her wallet into her crossbody bag, making sure James's black card was tucked safely inside. She rarely used it, preferring her own modest credit card for most purchases. But buying a car was different. This would be the one exception to her usual rule of financial independence. As she headed out the door, Diane couldn't have known that her ordinary Tuesday was about to become anything but. The Prestige Auto Gallery stood like a gleaming monument to luxury in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood. Its facade was all glass and polished metal, reflecting the morning sun in a way that seemed designed to intimidate. Diane pulled up in her aging sedan, the contrast between her vehicle and those displayed in the showroom windows impossible to miss. She parked between a sleek sports car and a businessman's luxury SUV, straightened her sweatshirt, and walked toward the entrance with purpose. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. A marble floor so polished it mirrored the crystal chandeliers overhead, golden decorative panels adorning the walls, and of course, the cars. Each vehicle sat on a slightly raised platform, perfectly lit to accentuate every curve and feature. A red sports coupe, a golden luxury sedan, a sleek black SUV, each more beautiful than the last. A gentle piano concerto played in the background, and the air was scented with what Diane recognized as an expensive custom fragrance. Everything about the space was designed to whisper, "This is for the elite." 4 salesmen in identical blue suits stood in various positions around the showroom. As Diane entered, she noticed the immediate shift in their body language, the slight stiffening, the exchanged glances, the hesitation. Not one of them moved to greet her. She wandered among the vehicles, running her finger lightly along the fender of a particularly striking red model. Still, no one approached. A couple entered behind her, the man in an expensive suit, the woman draped in designer labels, and 2 salesmen immediately moved to assist them. Diane smiled to herself. This wasn't the first time her appearance had led to assumptions, and she doubted it would be the last. She continued her self-guided tour, bending to examine the interior of a golden sedan that had caught her eye. "Can I help you?" The voice finally came after she had spent nearly 15 minutes in the showroom. Diane straightened to find a young salesman, Not the senior staff who were attending to the well-dressed couple, but clearly junior by comparison. "Just looking for now," Diane replied with a warm smile, "but I'm in the market for a new car." "I see," he said, his tone suggesting he didn't believe her. "Well, let me know if you have any questions. These models might be a bit premium for most budgets." "I'm particularly interested in this one," Diane said, indicating the golden sedan. "The Crown Victoria Sovereign, right? The hybrid model with the enhanced safety package." The salesman blinked, clearly surprised by her specific knowledge. "Yes, that's correct. You know your cars." "I do my research," Diane said simply. "Could you tell me about the warranty options?" As she asked informed, detailed questions, the young man's demeanor gradually shifted. He began to engage more genuinely, though still with an undertone of doubt. From the corner of her eye, Diane noticed one of the senior salesmen, tall, with perfectly coiffed hair and a stance that radiated confidence, watching their interaction with narrowed eyes. It was only a matter of time, she knew, before her interaction with the junior salesman would attract more attention, whether welcome or not. The Crown Victoria Sovereign accelerates from 0 to 60 in 4.2 seconds. But what really impresses me is the regenerative braking system, Diane said, leaning slightly to peek at the vehicle's interior. "I read that it's the most efficient in its class." The junior salesman, who had introduced himself as Kevin, nodded with increasing respect. "That's right. The engineers redesigned the entire system for this model year. And the safety rating? 5 stars across all categories, correct?" Diane continued, recalling the details from her extensive research. "Yes, ma'am. Top of its class in side impact protection specifically." Their conversation had evolved into a genuinely enthusiastic discussion about the car's features, with Kevin gradually forgetting his initial skepticism. Diane knew her stuff, and it was becoming impossible to ignore. "Would you like to sit inside?" Kevin offered, moving to open the door for her. "I'd love to," Diane replied, genuinely excited. As she settled into the driver's seat, her hands instinctively finding the perfect position on the leather-wrapped steering wheel, she couldn't help but admire the craftsmanship. The dashboard was an elegant blend of traditional luxury and cutting-edge technology. She adjusted the seat, noting how perfectly it supported her back. "The ergonomics are excellent," she commented. "Better than the German model I test drove last week." Kevin leaned in through the open door. The designer spent 2 years perfecting just the driver's seat alone. "It shows," Diane said, "and the entertainment system integrates with any smartphone platform." "Absolutely. Let me show you how it works." Kevin was mid-demonstration when a shadow fell across them. The senior salesman Diane had noticed earlier was standing beside the car, his expression a practiced mask of professional courtesy that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Kevin, I believe the Andersons need assistance with their paperwork," he said smoothly. "I'll take over here." Kevin hesitated, clearly reluctant to abandon a potential sale, but nodded. "Of course, Mr. Blake." He turned to Diane. "It was a pleasure speaking with you, ma'am." As Kevin walked away, the senior salesman, Blake, assessed Diane with a quick, dismissive glance. His smile remained fixed, but there was something calculating behind it. "I see you're interested in the Sovereign," he said, his tone suggesting he found this surprising. "It's our flagship model, starts at $175,000. Diane nodded, unperturbed by the figure. "Yes, Kevin was just showing me the infotainment system. It's quite impressive." Blake leaned against the car door. "It certainly is. We have more accessible models on the lot as well. Perhaps something in a different price range would be more suitable?" The implication was clear, and Diane had to suppress a smile. She'd experienced this kind of treatment before. "Actually," she said, stepping out of the car with deliberate grace, "I've done extensive research, and the Sovereign is exactly what I'm looking for. The combination of performance, safety features, and environmental considerations checks all my boxes." Blake's eyebrows raised slightly. "Environmental considerations? At this price point, most of our clients are more interested in horsepower than carbon footprint." "I'm not most of your clients," Diane replied simply. "Clearly," Blake said, his gaze traveling over her casual attire. "Well, if you're serious about the Sovereign, we should discuss financing options. These vehicles typically require substantial down payments and excellent credit scores." "That won't be necessary," Diane said. "If I decide to purchase, I'll be paying in full today." For the first time, Blake's composed expression faltered, genuine surprise flashing across his features before he recovered. "I see. Well, that's unusual." Diane smiled. "Is it? I would think a dealership of this caliber would encounter clients who prefer straightforward transactions." Blake's assessment of her shifted visibly, recalculating the situation. Two other salesmen had drifted closer, sensing something interesting unfolding. The air in the showroom seemed to thicken with tension. "Perhaps we should discuss this in my office," Blake suggested, gesturing toward a glass-enclosed space at the rear of the showroom. "I'd prefer to continue looking at the vehicle first," Diane replied. "I have a few more questions about the features." Blake's professional smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. What else would you like to know?" The showroom's ambient music seemed to fade into the background, as Blake's patience visibly thinned. Diane had spent the last 20 minutes asking increasingly technical questions about the Sovereign, from its engine specifications to the sourcing of its leather interior. "And the warranty covers the hybrid battery system for how long exactly?" she asked, knowing full well the answer from her research. 8 years or 100,000 miles, Blake replied, his tone growing increasingly clipped. Two more customers had entered the showroom, and she could tell he was calculating the commission he might be losing by remaining trapped in this conversation. "That's impressive," Diane nodded. "I'd like to see the color options available. Is the interior customizable as well?" Blake's professional veneer cracked slightly. Ms. Mitchell," Diane corrected. "Diane Mitchell." "Ms. Mitchell," he continued. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but perhaps we should be direct with each other." He lowered his voice, though not enough to prevent nearby staff from hearing. "This vehicle represents a significant investment. The monthly payments alone would exceed what most people spend on their mortgage." Diane met his gaze steadily. "I'm aware of the price point, Mr. Blake. As I mentioned earlier, I'm prepared to purchase outright today if the car meets my expectations." Blake let out a small, incredulous laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "With all due respect, Ms. Mitchell, I've been in this business for 15 years. I can typically gauge a serious buyer within the first few minutes." "And your gauge says?" Diane asked, though she already knew the answer. Blake glanced pointedly at her casual attire, the worn jeans, the simple sweatshirt, the practical crossbody bag. "Let's just say I have concerns about whether this particular model aligns with your current situation." The atmosphere in the showroom had shifted. The other salesman had stopped pretending not to listen, and even a couple browsing a nearby vehicle had turned to observe the unfolding scene. "My current situation," Diane repeated, her voice level. "Please enlighten me about my situation, Mr. Blake." Something in her tone might have warned a more perceptive person, but Blake was too convinced of his assessment. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to what he clearly thought was a considerate whisper. "Look, I understand. It's fun to dream, to sit in these cars and imagine. We get people like you in here all the time." "People like me," Diane echoed. "Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with aspirational visits, but my job is to focus on qualified buyers. Perhaps one of our entry-level models would be more appropriate." "I'd like to proceed with the Sovereign," Diane interrupted calmly. "The golden one, with all the options we discussed." Blake straightened, his patience visibly evaporating. The mask of polite professionalism slipped completely, replaced by barely concealed condescension. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, his voice louder now, "I don't think you understand what you're asking. This vehicle costs more than some homes. The insurance alone would be astronomical." Diane remained composed. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Blake. I'd like to proceed with the purchase." It was at this moment that Blake made the fatal miscalculation that would come to define this interaction. With an audience of colleagues and customers now openly watching, he raised his hand in a dismissive stop gesture directly in front of Diane's face. "I'm sorry," he announced, loud enough for everyone in the showroom to hear, "but you clearly don't have the money for this. I won't waste any more of your time, or mine." The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the showroom was fixed on them, the salesmen in their identical blue suits, the handful of customers who had frozen mid-conversation, even the receptionist who had paused in her typing. Diane stood perfectly still, her expression unreadable as she absorbed both the words and the gesture, the absolute dismissal based solely on appearance and assumption. "I see," she said finally, her voice quiet but carrying in the silent showroom. That's quite an assessment based on very little information, Mr. Blake. Blake crossed his arms, doubling down rather than reconsidering. It's based on 15 years of experience, Ms. Mitchell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have clients waiting who are actually in a position to make a purchase today. He started to turn away, clearly considering the matter closed. One moment, Mr. Blake, Diane said, her voice taking on a new edge that made him pause. I believe I'm owed an explanation for why exactly you think I don't have the money. I'm curious about what specific evidence led you to this conclusion. The air in the showroom crackled with tension. Blake turned back to Diane, irritation etched across his features. He hadn't expected her to challenge him, certainly not with an audience. Look, he said, his tone a poor attempt at patience. This isn't personal. It's simply a matter of qualifying buyers. In this establishment, we deal with a certain caliber of client. And how exactly do you determine this caliber? Diane asked, her voice steady. Is there a specific dress code I missed on the website? A particular way one must speak? Or is it something else entirely? A flush crept up Blake's neck. Behind him, one of the other salesmen shifted uncomfortably, and the couple who had been browsing nearby exchanged glances. Ms. Mitchell, it's simply common sense. The Sovereign is a vehicle for executives, entrepreneurs, successful professionals, people who have achieved a certain level of success. He gestured vaguely at her appearance. Your presentation suggests you might be more comfortable at one of our sister dealerships downtown. Diane absorbed the insult without flinching. In that moment, she made a decision about how to proceed. She could simply walk away, take her business elsewhere. She could reveal her financial status immediately and watch him backpedal, but something about the absolute certainty with which he had dismissed her, the public nature of the humiliation he had attempted to inflict, deserved a more measured response. Mr. Blake, she said, her voice taking on a quiet authority that made several heads turn, I'd like to speak with your manager. Blake's expression shifted from irritation to smug satisfaction. Of course. I'm sure Mr. Reynolds will be happy to explain our qualification process more thoroughly. He turned and strode toward the glass office at the back of the showroom, clearly believing he was summoning reinforcement rather than inviting his own reckoning. Diane remained where she stood, acutely aware of the eyes on her. The junior salesman, Kevin, shot her a sympathetic glance from across the room. The receptionist had picked up her phone and was whispering urgently into it. In the stillness of that moment, Diane thought about all the people who had ever been judged by their appearance, dismissed because they didn't fit someone's narrow definition of success or worth. She thought about James, who despite his wealth, still valued her philosophy that a person's character mattered infinitely more than their outer trappings. Blake emerged from the office followed by an older man in a charcoal suit, presumably Mr. Reynolds, the manager. His expression was a careful neutral, assessing the situation as he approached. Ms. Mitchell, I understand there's been some confusion, Reynolds began, his tone conciliatory but with an underlying dismissiveness that matched Blake's attitude. Mr. Blake is one of our most experienced sales associates, and he's simply trying to ensure that all our clients are properly matched with vehicles that suit their needs and capabilities. Yes, he made those capabilities quite clear, Diane replied. He stated in front of your entire showroom that I don't have the money for the vehicle I'm interested in purchasing. Reynolds' smile remained fixed. I'm sure there was a misunderstanding. We pride ourselves on customer service at Prestige Auto Gallery. There was no misunderstanding, Diane said firmly. Mr. Blake made his assessment based solely on my appearance, not on any financial information. I find that approach both unprofessional and disappointing. Reynolds exchanged a quick glance with Blake. Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. Why don't we start fresh? What vehicle were you interested in? I was interested in the Crown Victoria Sovereign, Diane said, emphasizing the past tense. But now, I'm not certain this is the establishment I want to do business with. The shift in Reynolds' demeanor was subtle but immediate. The prospect of losing a high-value sale clearly concerned him more than Blake's behavior. I assure you, Ms. Mitchell, that Mr. Blake's approach doesn't reflect our company values. If you're seriously considering the Sovereign, we would be delighted to— I was serious, Diane interrupted. Mr. Blake wasn't. She reached for her crossbody bag, opening it deliberately. The hushed tension in the showroom was broken only by the soft classical music still playing overhead. Reynolds and Blake watched with poorly concealed skepticism as Diane reached into her bag, their expressions suggesting they expected her to produce some irrelevant document or perhaps a modest bank statement that would only confirm their assumptions. Instead, she withdrew a sleek black wallet, its leather soft and unmarked by the wear and tear of regular use. She opened it with deliberate slowness, removing a single card that instantly commanded attention. The unmistakable black titanium of an invitation-only credit card reserved for clients whose wealth put them in the upper echelons of society. "Perhaps this will clarify my situation for you, Mr. Blake," Diane said calmly, holding out the card. Blake stared at it, his expression cycling rapidly through disbelief, shock, and the dawning horror of realization. The black card gleamed under the showroom lights, its presence as powerful as a royal seal in medieval times. "That's," Blake began, but words seemed to fail him. "Yes," Diane confirmed. "It is." Reynolds moved forward quickly, professional enough to recognize the catastrophic error unfolding before him. "Ms. Mitchell, please accept our most sincere apologies for this misunderstanding. The Onyx Black Card is, of course, more than sufficient for any purchase in our establishment." "It's not a misunderstanding," Diane corrected him gently but firmly. "Mr. Blake made a deliberate judgment based on my appearance. He decided, without any financial information whatsoever, that I didn't belong here." She turned her attention back to Blake, who had paled visibly. "The card belongs to my husband, James Mitchell. Perhaps you've heard of Mitchell Global Investments?" The effect of the name was electric. Reynolds' eyes widened, and a small gasp came from the direction of the receptionist's desk. James Mitchell was indeed known in Chicago business circles, a billionaire whose investment firm managed portfolios for some of the wealthiest families in the Midwest and beyond. "Ms. Mitchell, I had no idea," Blake began, his voice strained. "That was precisely the problem," Diane interjected. "You had no idea who I was, yet you felt comfortable publicly humiliating me based on my clothing. You decided my worth as a customer, and perhaps as a person, based solely on my appearance." Blake's face had flushed from pale to red, the full implications of his mistake becoming clear. Not only had he insulted a woman who could easily purchase every car in the showroom, but he had done so to the wife of one of Chicago's most influential businessmen. "I can't begin to express how deeply sorry I am," he stammered. "It was a terrible misjudgment on my part." Reynolds stepped forward, clearly attempting damage control. "Ms. Mitchell, please allow us to make this right. We would be honored to assist you with your purchase. And, of course, we can offer an exclusive discount as a gesture of goodwill." "A discount," Diane repeated thoughtfully. "Because now you've determined I can afford the full price?" Reynolds faltered, caught in the contradiction. "I simply meant—" "I understand what you meant," Diane said. "But I'd like to be clear about something. My objection isn't that Mr. Blake failed to recognize my financial status. My objection is that he felt entitled to make assumptions and to treat another human being with contempt based on those assumptions." She glanced around the showroom, noting that every person present was listening intently. The junior salesman, Kevin, was watching with something like admiration in his eyes. "The truth is," Diane continued, turning the black card over in her fingers, "I rarely use this card. I don't typically define myself by my husband's success or our financial status. I choose to dress comfortably. I choose to drive practical vehicles. I choose to value people based on their character, not their appearance or possessions." She returned the card to her wallet deliberately, then looked directly at Blake. "The question now isn't whether I can afford your car, Mr. Blake. The question is whether you deserve my business." The silence that followed Diane's statement was absolute. Even the ambient music seemed to have faded into nothingness, as though the sound system itself was holding its breath. Blake stood frozen, his earlier confidence shattered, while Reynolds moved into crisis management mode. "Ms. Mitchell," the manager began, his voice a study in controlled panic, "I cannot apologize enough for this unfortunate incident. Mr. Blake's conduct does not reflect our values, and I assure you that appropriate measures will be taken." Blake finally found his voice, though it emerged strained and unnaturally high. "Ms. Mitchell, please, I made a terrible mistake. If you'll allow me to make it right—" "How exactly would you make it right?" Diane asked, her tone genuinely curious rather than accusatory. Would you treat the next person who walks in wearing casual clothes with more respect? Or would you simply be more careful about who you judge openly? Blake had no answer for this, his mouth opening and closing without producing sound. Reynolds stepped in smoothly. "Ms. Mitchell, if you'll step into my office, I'd like to personally handle your purchase. We'll ensure you receive our VIP treatment, and I'll see to it that Mr. Blake is—" "Actually," Diane interrupted, "I'd prefer to continue our conversation here." She gestured around the showroom. "After all, my humiliation wasn't private. Why should the resolution be?" By now, a small crowd had gathered, other salespeople, customers who had entered during the confrontation, even two detailers who had emerged from the service area, drawn by the palpable tension. "Of course," Reynolds conceded, visibly uncomfortable with the public nature of the situation, but seeing no alternative. From the corner of her eye, Diane noticed Kevin, the junior salesman who had initially assisted her, step forward hesitantly. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, his voice steady despite the obvious risk he was taking by speaking up. "If you're still interested in the Sovereign, I would be honored to help you. I believe the golden model we discussed would suit you perfectly." The gesture wasn't lost on Diane. This young man was not only offering professional courtesy, but making a public statement by aligning himself with her rather than his colleagues. Blake shot Kevin a venomous look, but Reynolds nodded quickly, grasping at any opportunity to salvage the situation. "An excellent suggestion. Kevin is one of our most knowledgeable associates." Diane considered for a moment, then shook her head gently. "I appreciate the offer, Kevin, truly. You were respectful and helpful from the beginning, but I think my husband and I will take our business elsewhere." She turned back to Blake, who seemed to physically shrink under her gaze. "Mr. Blake, I want you to understand something. Today wasn't about a car. It wasn't even about money. It was about basic human dignity and respect." Blake nodded miserably, unable to meet her eyes. "I hope," Diane continued, "that the next time someone walks into this showroom, regardless of what they're wearing, how they speak, or what assumptions you might make about their financial status, you'll remember this moment." A murmur of approval rippled through the onlookers. Reynolds, sensing that the situation had spiraled completely beyond his control, made one last desperate attempt. "Ms. Mitchell, please reconsider. Your husband has been a valued client of Prestige Auto Gallery in the past, and we would be devastated to lose your family's business." Diane raised an eyebrow. "Has he? That's interesting, since James has purchased all his vehicles from Lakeside Motors for the past decade." Reynolds paled, caught in the obvious lie. "I must have been mistaken." "Yes," Diane agreed. "You were, about many things." She straightened her shoulders and adjusted her crossbody bag. With calm dignity, she addressed the entire showroom. "Thank you all for this enlightening experience. I wish you well." As she turned to leave, Kevin stepped forward once more. "Ms. Mitchell, for what it's worth, I think you handled this with incredible grace. I would have lost my temper much sooner." Diane smiled genuinely at the young man. "Thank you, Kevin. Remember this feeling when you're in Mr. Blake's position someday. Treat everyone as though they matter, because they do." With that, she walked toward the exit, her head held high, leaving behind a showroom full of stunned faces and one important lesson about the danger of judging people by their appearance. The glass doors of Prestige Auto Gallery closed behind Diane with a soft pneumatic hiss. As she walked to her aging sedan, she could see frantic activity through the showroom windows, Reynolds gesticulating wildly at Blake, Kevin being pulled aside by another manager, staff huddled in small groups clearly discussing what had just transpired. Diane sat in her car for a moment, taking a deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly, not from anger, but from the adrenaline of confrontation. Despite her composed exterior, standing up for herself had taken emotional energy. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "How did the car shopping go?" She smiled, typing back, "Enlightening. We'll tell you everything tonight." As she started the engine, she noticed Reynolds hurrying across the parking lot toward her car. She rolled down the window as he approached. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, slightly out of breath, "please, I implore you to reconsider. Mr. Blake has been suspended pending review, and I've spoken personally with our regional director, who would like to offer you our most sincere apologies." Diane looked at him thoughtfully. "Mr. Reynolds, I appreciate that you're trying to mitigate the damage. but I think we both know this isn't just about one salesman's behavior. I assure you, Ms. Mitchell, Blake's actions were an anomaly." "Were they?" Diane interrupted gently. "Because when I first walked in, not a single salesperson approached me for nearly 15 minutes, while better-dressed customers received immediate attention. That suggests a culture, not an individual." Reynolds had no response to this observation, his professional smile faltering. "Sometimes," Diane continued, "a mistake like this can be an opportunity for genuine reflection and change. I hope that's what happens here." She rolled up her window and drove away, leaving Reynolds standing in the parking lot, his expression a mixture of consternation and realization. As Diane navigated through Chicago's midday traffic, her phone rang through the car's speaker system. The caller ID displayed Lakeside Motors. "Hello, Ms. Mitchell," came a warm female voice when Diane answered. "This is Sarah Jenkins from Lakeside Motors. Your husband mentioned you might be car shopping today, and I wanted to reach out to see if we could be of assistance." Diane smiled at the timing. "Actually, Sarah, I am in the market for a new vehicle. I just had a rather interesting experience at one of your competitors." "Oh?" Sarah's tone was professionally curious, but not prying. "Let's just say they made certain assumptions based on my casual attire," Diane explained. "I'm looking for a dealership where I'll be treated with respect regardless of how I'm dressed." "Ms. Mitchell, at Lakeside Motors, we believe that everyone deserves the same level of service and respect," Sarah replied without hesitation. "Your husband has been a valued client for years, but even if you walked in as a complete stranger, our approach would be the same." "That's refreshing to hear," Diane said. "I'm interested in the Crown Victoria Sovereign, preferably in gold. Do you have any on the lot?" "We have 2 models available for viewing," Sarah confirmed. "Would you like to schedule an appointment to see them?" "I would, thank you. How about tomorrow morning?" "Perfect. And Ms. Mitchell, feel free to dress however makes you comfortable. We're interested in helping you find the right car, not judging your wardrobe choices." After ending the call, Diane found herself smiling. There were still businesses that understood the fundamental importance of treating people with dignity. Meanwhile, back at Prestige Auto Gallery, the consequences of Blake's mistake were only beginning to unfold. By the time Diane arrived home that evening, the regional director had personally called to apologize, having been informed of the incident by a panicking Reynolds. What none of them knew yet was that one of the customers who had witnessed the entire exchange was a lifestyle blogger with a substantial following among Chicago's elite. By morning, the story of how Prestige Auto Gallery had humiliated the wife of billionaire James Mitchell would be circulating through social media and the city's high-end social circles. For Blake, the consequences would be particularly severe. His suspension would become permanent termination. When background checks revealed this wasn't his first instance of discriminatory behavior toward customers, his reputation in the luxury automotive sales community would be irreparably damaged. For Kevin, however, the day marked an unexpected turning point. His willingness to stand up for what was right, even at professional risk, would catch the attention of Lakeside Motors management, who would offer him a position with significantly better terms than his job at Prestige. And the most far-reaching consequence? Prestige Auto Gallery would be forced to implement comprehensive training on unconscious bias and equitable customer service. Changes that would eventually benefit countless customers who, like Diane, deserve to be treated with respect regardless of their appearance. 1 week later, Diane pulled into the driveway of her and James's lakefront home in a gleaming golden Crown Victoria Sovereign. The purchase experience at Lakeside Motors had been everything Prestige Auto Gallery wasn't. Respectful, focused on her needs rather than her appearance, and genuinely pleasant. As she stepped out of the car, James emerged from the front door, a broad smile lighting up his face. "It's beautiful," he said, admiring the vehicle, "but not nearly as beautiful as its owner." Diane laughed, accepting his kiss. "Smooth talker, but thank you for the card that day. It made quite an impression." "From what you've told me, you made quite an impression all on your own," James replied. "Sarah Jenkins called to thank me for referring you. Said you were one of the most knowledgeable customers she's ever worked with." They walked toward the house together, arms linked. "You know," James said thoughtfully, "the story's gotten around. I've had 3 different clients mention it in meetings this week." Diane sighed. "I wasn't trying to cause a scene or damage their business. I know that, but sometimes these things need to happen. He squeezed her hand. Reynolds called me yesterday. Did he? Diane raised an eyebrow. Damage control? James nodded. Partly, but he also mentioned they're implementing new training protocols for their staff. He wanted to thank you, believe it or not. Thank me? For costing them a sale and probably several more. For showing them a blind spot that was ultimately hurting their business, James explained. He admitted that they've probably lost countless qualified buyers over the years because of these kinds of superficial judgments. Diane considered this as they entered their home. It's sad, really. So many people are judged unfairly based on how they look, what they wear, or how they speak. Most don't have the privilege of a black card to prove their worth. That's why what you did matters, James said. It wasn't just about you or that dealership. It was about challenging the idea that someone's appearance determines their value. The following month, Diane received an unexpected email from Kevin, the junior salesman who had shown her respect from the beginning. He was now working at Lakeside Motors and thriving in an environment that valued integrity over appearances. His message was simple but meaningful. Thank you for reminding me why treating people with dignity matters. You change more than you know that day. Diane smiled as she read his words. Sometimes the most powerful statement isn't made with wealth or status, but with quiet dignity and an unwavering commitment to being treated with basic human respect. She looked out at her golden sovereign gleaming in the driveway. Not just a luxury vehicle, but a reminder that true value has nothing to do with appearances and everything to do with how we treat one another. If this story resonated with you, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been judged based on your appearance? How did you handle it? From Chicago to California, from Texas to New York, our viewers across America share these powerful moments of triumph and transformation every day. Your experiences matter, and we want to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that reveal the extraordinary courage of ordinary people. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new upload, and share this video with someone who might need a reminder that appearances aren't everything. Remember, sometimes the most powerful statement we can make is simply standing our ground with dignity. Until next time, thank you for watching, and remember, your worth is never determined by how others see you, but by how you see yourself.